Senate will come to order.
Members of this prestigious body, the United States Senate, convene here in the spirit of one of the 7 Noahide laws, which was set forth by you as an eternal universal code of ethics for all mankind, that every society be governed by just law.
The Noahide laws, a system of governance for the Gentile world, widely accepted by political leaders.
Are non-Jews obligated to keep the 7 Noahide laws? And if they are, how are they supposed to know that they're obligated to keep them? And how are they supposed to know what they are?
Well, every person in the world has to keep the 7 Noahide laws. And there are different religions and different things, so they are obligated to say, well, what am I doing here? Well, let's look into it.
Could this be the one world religion, which will lead billions into the great deception?
The Pope was welcomed by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan.
The one world religion.
Pope Francis was also welcomed by his friend the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. He is one of the organizers for the Pope's trip.
And what is up, everyone? Welcome to On the Mark. I'm Jake Grant, and we're going to be joined once again by Dr. Pigeon to go into a very interesting topic, one that ties into some current events, especially a current pilgrimage the Pope has just recently made over to the Middle East. And this is going to be regarding the One World Order. And of course, in previous episodes, we've briefly talked about the Noahide laws, which is a fairly interesting topic. It's something that is proposed by the Jewish Sanhedrin, and it's something that, in a way, could be sounding like a good moral thing for people to adopt. However, whenever we inspect it closer, we find that there could be a more nefarious nature to these Noahide laws, especially when it comes to a possible one world religion, and also how this one world religion would be governed across the world. So we're going to be talking about this topic, the Noahide laws, and of course, once again, we're joined by Dr. Stephen Pigeon.
Well, Jake, how are you today?
Pretty good, pretty good. I think this is going to be a great topic. I was looking forward to it when I saw that we were going to actually break into it specifically, because a lot of people don't know what the Noahide laws are, and I know I'm just, very roughly familiar with them, but it's definitely not the commandments in the Torah. It seems to be a replacement, and we know that things that are generally antichrist or against God are usually replacements to the things that he's already given us. And so that's when, I started to have some red flags raised about these Noahide laws, and I think our audience would do well to investigate them with us during today's episode.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Jake. And I think what you see is that there's a very interesting term that is used, and the term is Mishnah. And what you see in the Talmud is, the Talmud is comprised really of 3 things. You have the Gemara, the Mishnah, and the Torah, or the Tanakh. And what you see with the Mishnah is the Mishnah means the duplicate. It's a double. It's an additional set of laws. And there is this big discussion in the Talmud, and in my opinion, it's an erroneous discussion. but they want to talk about the oral law and about how the oral law was always with them and about how the oral law supersedes, in many cases, the written Torah. And it is then codified as the written oral law. I mean, that should tell you something. It's codified as the written oral law known as the Mishnah, the duplicate. And a lot of this hinges around the idea that there was an oral law given when the judges were appointed under Exodus 18. You know, Moshe's father-in-law said, you can't handle this yourself. You need to appoint, you know, leaders of thousands, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10, to make these adjudications. Now, we have a court system like that in the United States, frankly, and where we have this, you know, this rising rank of appellate courts that hear fewer and fewer cases. And these courts do consider all these things, and then they would set down their decisions, and those decisions would, you know, initially, supposedly, they were given orally, and then eventually they would become written decisions. What we have seen, though, however, in the practice of Talmudism, is that we don't have the decisions of those priests or those Levites or those fathers of the tribes that were sitting there in over the houses of Yasharon making decisions. Instead, we get replacement theology with a group of rabbis who were sitting around from the first century forward, commenting on the Torah or the Tanakh, and those opinions and later opinions, you know, rabbis from the 4th and the 7th and even the 14th century, are then, their comments are now considered oral law. They didn't exist at the time that Exodus 18 was written. They didn't even exist, most of them, until after the Mashiach had been crucified. And then these opinions would reflect their rejection of the deity of the Messiah. And this became the Mishnah. Now, arguably, there was a Mishnah in place before the Messiah in the Yerushalmi Talmud. But that Mishnah is scant in its content compared to the Babylonian Talmud, which is vast and controlling. And in many respects, it's very similar to the writings you see in Islam with the Sunnah and the Hadith and the and of course the Quran. They're very similar in content, very similar in idea, and they're very similar in terms of the scope of their control. You know, in the Quran, it's very express. God has no son. It says repeatedly over and over again, although he did have 3 daughters at one point. But even that was denied later on. But God has no son is the repetitive adage of the Quran. But it is also the repetitive adage of the Talmud. It's the repetitive adage of the Talmud as well. And so we see over and over again this idea that there is no son, there is no son, there is no son. And this is why it's quite easy for Islam and Judaism to blend one together. I mean, the two of them lived well together in Spain under the Moors for centuries, 7 centuries roughly. They lived well together, adhering to the same doctrine, God has no son. And so this Mishnah, this duplicate law, if you will, has been constructed. It's a construction of men, the traditions of men. Mashiach talks about it. You nullify the Torah with the traditions of men. And this is what has been going on for a long time. This is what is present in the Talmudic writings. Well, some of that includes these noahide laws. Now, these noahide laws are, and you're going to see here, they are a pure invention of the rabbis in the Talmud. Okay? They contradict scripture, they contradict the 10 Commandments, and they openly contradict what is the true source of what should be spoken about here. And they're done so in order to create worldwide control. And to give just a preface on this, Jake, it's really important that we know. The Noahide laws are being proposed as the standard of morality worldwide, and they will be adjudicated by an impaneled Sanhedrin, a group of 70 Jewish elders who will be adjudicating the world's morality predicated upon the Talmud, the traditions of men as constructed by post-Messianic rabbinical literature. That's something for all of us to consider. It's a very dangerous world.
Yeah. In fact, in the short video that our audience has seen going into this episode that I had prepared, we actually have a guest chaplain come in to do a prayer, and he quotes that basically the Noahide laws are something that is being adopted by that particular political group. And it's interesting that this is something that is a broad stroke across the world, as we understand you Gentiles don't like certain aspects of the Torah, but we're going to dumb things down to these 7 kind of strangely picked laws. And I know we're going to get into kind of the different requirements of the Noahide laws and why it is that they seem to choose these commandments over other Torah commandments. But it is interesting that it is being presented as this base level of morality worldwide. Hey, if you are a son of Abraham, whether it be Ishmael or Isaac, you can abide by these Noahide laws. If you are even just one of the descendants of Noah himself, you can abide by these Noahide laws. And that kind of seems to be what they're going for, is this base level morality that can allow for a little bit of leeway when it comes to what the Torah says. So that's a problematic area in itself. But also, they seem to be slipping into the Noahide laws this concept of blasphemy, which, whenever we look into it, would be punishable by death. And that's where it becomes a serious end times, hey, I need to start paying attention to what this is and why they're starting to apply it. Because if this is something that is going to cause it to be a blasphemous act to profess the Messiah, Yahushua, then that's a dangerous antichrist type religion, and it's not base morality, it's debased morality.
Oh, I mean, that's a great word for it, Jake, debased morality. The truth is that we have the 10 commandments, the 10 Devarim, which were written by the finger of Yah himself. And he said, this is my covenant between me and you. Do these and live in them. Do these